I am a 50-year-old woman who has always believed in reciprocity, doing good for others with the expectation that kindness will be returned in some form. From an early age, this principle guided my relationships, especially with my husband. I assumed that the love and care I poured into our marriage would be reflected back to me, but life didn't unfold as I imagined. Growing up, the role of a woman was often defined by sacrifice. I took on that role with all my heart, dedicating myself to my husband and children, believing that these sacrifices would lead to a rewarding future. But despite my tireless devotion and countless early mornings, my efforts went largely unrecognized. Instead, I was often met with complaints and the sting of overlooked mistakes. My life wasn't one of forced submission. I simply followed the path laid out for me, a traditional marriage to a coworker 5 years my senior, as was expected in those days. When my daughter was born, I left my job to become a full-time homemaker, a decision I never regretted. It felt like a natural step toward maintaining family harmony. Though our lives were far from the glamorous portrayals of TV dramas, they were stable and manageable, until my daughter entered 9th grade. That's when tragedy struck. My mother passed away suddenly from a heart attack, and during my mourning, I discovered that my husband had been unfaithful. In the midst of my grief, he found comfort elsewhere, becoming distant and eventually asking for a divorce. At that time, divorce was still a rare and stigmatized choice, and despite his cold, irresponsible actions, I couldn't bring myself to let go. Looking back, I see how naive I was, but I couldn't ignore the stakes. My daughter, witnessing the unraveling of our marriage, made everything more complicated. Though I resisted divorce, I found myself trapped in a miserable situation. One day, during a heated argument about our separation, my father, who had recently lost his wife and seen his daughter suffer, came to visit. He saw the pain we were both enduring and offered me refuge, urging me to leave with my daughter. His support was a turning point, offering a way out of a toxic environment. My father's concern helped me realize that staying in this unhappy marriage was no longer viable. Overwhelmed by his understanding, I agreed to my husband's request for a divorce. He gave me $6,000 as part of the settlement. With my father's encouragement, I found a modest townhouse for myself and my daughter, a fresh start after years of struggle. Though I knew our financial situation would be difficult, I was determined to give my daughter the stability she needed, even as society scrutinized me as a divorced woman raising a teenage girl. As my daughter entered high school, she expressed the pain of our breakup, but I remained resolute. I threw myself into finding stable work. Despite the challenges of being an older, divorced woman with a dependent child, I took on multiple part-time jobs, worked night shifts, and did freelance work when I could. By the time she was in her senior year, my daughter was excelling academically. Despite our financial difficulties, I pushed myself harder, taking a demanding 11-hour shift at a 24-hour restaurant to save 2/3 of my earnings for her college tuition. The whispers of judgment from others, particularly men who saw me as vulnerable, didn't deter me. I sacrificed so much, but I did it all for her future. When my daughter was accepted into Harvard, it was a moment of immense pride. All the hardships, all the sacrifices, seemed worth it. Though I had provided for her education and a stable home, the house felt emptier without her. We kept in touch regularly, and during her early months at college, our relationship deepened. As she neared graduation, I could see the person she had become, a successful, independent woman. She got a job at a defense corporation and chose to live on her own. I helped her with the down payment on a condo near her workplace. I was proud of her, even as I noticed the growing distance between us. Still, I supported her unconditionally, knowing that she was finding her own way in the world. However, as her wedding approached, my financial strain resurfaced. Some wondered why I continued to struggle when she was fully capable of supporting herself, but I wanted to contribute to her happiness, to help her avoid any tension with her future in-laws. I was determined to support her wedding, even at my own expense. Then came her 28th birthday. I had been looking forward to celebrating with her, but she informed me that she had plans with someone named Scott. She downplayed any need for special preparations. Though I knew she didn't mean to hurt me, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of neglect. Her birthday, the day she was born, seemed like just another day to her. I had always put so much effort into making her special, but her indifference stung. Despite my hurt, I decided to visit her at her office on her birthday, hoping for a small moment of connection. But what I encountered there was a shock to my system. I saw my ex-husband with his new partner, people I never wanted to see again. When I called my daughter, She abruptly hung up, claiming to be in a meeting. Just then, I saw her, smiling and embracing her father, while her boyfriend warmly greeted him as well. It felt like a betrayal. Everyone seemed to have conspired against me. I left the scene, feeling drained and broken. Later, my daughter came to visit and handed me a wedding invitation, announcing her engagement. The names on the invitation shocked me. How could she, after all we had been through, treat me as just another guest at her wedding? I confronted her, the pain too much to keep inside. I told her how deeply I was hurt by her actions, hoping she would understand. I was deeply hurt by the way my daughter treated me at such a significant moment in her life. I wasn't just a guest at her wedding, I was her mother. I confronted her about how marginalized I felt, how all the sacrifices I had made for her seemed to mean nothing now. Her response, however, was filled with pain and regret. She apologized, explaining that she felt trapped by the circumstances. She desperately wanted to marry Scott, but his parents were scrutinizing every aspect of her life, including her family's past. This revelation stirred a mix of emotions within me: hurt, yes, but also a reluctant understanding of the pressure she was under. In that conversation, my daughter confided in me her fear that our past, my divorce and our struggles as a single-parent family, would ruin her future. She worried that if she was open about our history, it would cost her the approval of Scott's family. Her words stung, but I did my best to listen, knowing that this was her way of navigating the complex web of expectations. Still, I couldn't hide my frustration. I reminded her of all the sacrifices I made for her, the years I worked tirelessly, the financial struggles I endured, and the emotional toll it took. And now, with her standing before me, focused only on her future comfort, I wondered if all of it had been for nothing. As I raised her, working long hours in a restaurant to fund her education, I believed our shared hardships would strengthen the bond between us. But when she dismissed our struggles in favor of her future, I felt blindsided. She revealed that her father and his new partner, who had played a part in our family's unraveling, had already met with her future in-laws, and all that seemed to matter now was what lay ahead, not the past. For the first time, I let her know just how disappointed I was. I expressed my hurt, hoping she might understand the depth of what I'd sacrificed, but instead, she retorted that if I truly wanted her out of my life, I should pay her back for everything she'd cost me. That hurtful remark escalated quickly, and before I knew it, she stormed out, leaving me alone with the wedding invitation that no longer had my name on it. The weight of that moment crushed me, and I couldn't help but wonder if the entire effort of saving for her wedding had been in vain. 2 years later, I received devastating news. My father, who had chosen to live independently so as not to burden me, had passed away. His death left me grappling with a painful realization of how much I had taken him for granted. A few months later, I inherited a small condo where he had lived, a reminder of the family bonds and struggles that had shaped my life. As I looked at the savings I had set aside for my daughter's wedding, money that had never been used, I made a decision. It was time to live for myself. After all, life had shown me that no one else would prioritize my happiness, so I had to. In the midst of these reflections, a friend from the restaurant where I worked encouraged me to pursue something for myself, free from societal pressures. Inspired, I took a leap and dove into the real estate business, studying auction bidding and using the savings from my father's condo sale to fund my new venture. To my surprise, I quickly became the owner of a building in a prime location. 8 months later, after a mountain climbing trip, I moved into the top floor, transforming it into my home. It was during this time, when I felt a new sense of fulfillment and freedom, that my daughter showed up at my door, pregnant and with a young child in tow. Tears streamed down her face as she told me about the turmoil in her life. Her husband had become violent and unfaithful, and now, with another child on the way, she needed help. She came to me not just for shelter, but because she had heard about my success and was hoping for financial assistance. She hinted at a claim to the money I had saved for her wedding and for my inheritance. In that moment, the emotions surged: anger, hurt, and compassion. I confronted her, my voice shaking with frustration. I saved for your education and your wedding. You told me to get out of your life. Now you think I owe you money? After all I've done for you, now it's all about money? It seems that the bond between a parent and child means nothing when it comes to cash. Now that I have money, you think you don't need a mother, right? Her words, laden with desperation and pain, followed. I thought my success was because of your sacrifices, but now I see that maybe it was all in vain. I've become selfish, thinking only of myself. How could you abandon me now? I have a child and another on the way. If you turn your back on us, I'll be like an orphan." Her outburst left me in turmoil, torn between my love for her and the years of frustration that still lingered. Finally, overwhelmed by the emotional weight of it all, I pulled out all the cash I had and threw it at her. "Since you're so desperate, take this, but after this, don't come back. I can't have you walking in and out of my life whenever it suits you." The words felt like a harsh lesson, but I knew they needed to be said. Your life is important, and so is mine. You can't manipulate me anymore. I asked her and her child to leave, feeling the pain of the situation in every fiber of my being. She never came back. Deep down, I knew this moment would come. If she had returned with genuine remorse, maybe I would have been torn between wanting to help her and my own boundaries, but that wasn't how things played out. Over time, I reflected on the journey my daughter and I had taken together. She never found the happiness she thought she would after leaving me behind to marry her husband, and as I sat with that truth, I realized that the only person who had truly found the happiness I sought was me, alone, but content in my own fulfillment. This experience has taught me a crucial lesson. No matter how strong your relationships are, it's essential to prioritize your own well-being. People can betray you, but you should never betray yourself. Happiness doesn't come from the sacrifices you make for others, it comes from the effort you put into creating a life that fulfills you. My story may seem like a life half-lived, but now I am committed to filling the rest of it with joy and experiences meant just for me. Thank you for hearing my story. I hope it offers some insight, and I encourage everyone to cherish and prioritize their own happiness. Let's support each other on the journey to live fully.